He wasn't just seeking a tactical advantage. Arjuna's heart and mind were filled with questions. He needed to see with his own eyes the faces of those who stood against him. I want to see the warriors I will be fighting against, he continued, to understand who has gathered here, ready for battle. His request was not one of hesitation, but rather a need for clarity, to know exactly who had chosen to support the cause of war. Krishna, always understanding the deeper layers of Arjuna's heart, listened in silence. As the horses stirred, Arjuna's gaze drifted across the vast sea of soldiers. His thoughts lingered on Duryodhana, the man at the center of this conflict, a prince driven by jealousy and ambition. Let me see, Arjuna added, the warriors assembled here, those who stand with Duryodhana, despite knowing his wicked nature. For Arjuna, this was more than just a battle of arms. It was a battle of righteousness. He wanted to look into the eyes of those who had aligned themselves with what he believed to be an unjust cause, to understand their resolve. Sanjaya, far away in the palace of King Dhritarashtra, continued narrating the scene to the blind king. "O king," he said, after hearing Arjuna's request, Krishna expertly maneuvered the grand chariot to stand right between the two vast armies. Sanjaya's voice carried the weight of the moment, for this was no ordinary battlefield. It was a stage where the fate of the world would be decided. Krishna, with calm precision, positioned the chariot exactly where Arjuna had asked. He halted the mighty horses in front of the great warriors of the Kuru clan. Right before Bhishma, the revered patriarch, and Dronacharya, the wise teacher, both of whom had shaped Arjuna's own path as a warrior. These were no ordinary opponents. They were mentors and kin, now standing on opposite sides of the looming conflict. Pointing toward the gathered warriors, Krishna spoke in his steady, reassuring voice. "Arjuna," he said, "behold the leaders of the Kauravas, gathered here before you." His words, though simple, carried the weight of the moment, forcing Arjuna to confront the reality of what lay ahead. This was not just a war of kingdoms, but a battle that pitted him against those he had once loved and respected. As the chariot stood still between the two mighty armies, the magnitude of what was to come began to dawn on Arjuna. The warrior's heart, though ready for battle, was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined. As Arjuna sat in his chariot, his eyes swept across the battlefield, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. What he saw was not just an army of warriors, but the faces of people he had grown up with, learned from, and loved. Fathers, grandfathers, revered teachers, uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, and dear friends, all stood before him, ready for war. On both sides of the field, he recognized these familiar faces, and the realization of who he would have to fight began to sink in. The sight of his own family, prepared to battle one another, shook Arjuna to his core. A wave of sorrow and compassion swept over him, more powerful than any fear of the enemy. His heart grew heavy with grief, and suddenly, the idea of fighting seemed unbearable. How could he draw his bow against those he had shared his life with, his kin, his mentors, his blood? Turning to Krishna, who stood calmly beside him, Arjuna's voice trembled. "O Krishna," he said, his words barely escaping his dry lips. "Seeing my family gathered here, prepared for war, I feel weak." His whole body seemed to betray him as his strength ebbed away. "My body trembles," he continued, "and my mouth has gone dry." Arjuna's hands began to shake, and his skin prickled with a strange coldness. The mighty Gandiva bow, which had never left his grasp in battle, now felt impossibly heavy. It slipped from his hands as if it no longer belonged to him, his strength and willpower fading with each passing moment. His body burned from within, his heart filled with turmoil. Struggling to keep his composure, Arjuna spoke again, his voice filled with anguish. "Krishna, I can't focus. My mind is spinning, and I can't stand still. All I see are bad omens, terrible signs of what's to come." His once unshakable resolve had crumbled, and he was left standing at the edge of an abyss, torn between duty and despair. The warrior who had faced countless battles now stood at the crossroads of his greatest challenge, one not fought with weapons, but with his heart and soul. As Arjuna stood in the midst of the battlefield, his heart burdened with grief, he turned to Krishna once more. His voice, now heavy with emotion, revealed the deep conflict within him. "Krishna," He began, I see no good in fighting this battle. What is the point of victory, of ruling a kingdom, or even of seeking happiness if it comes at the cost of killing my own family?